It's incredible to think that it's been 2 years since the reveal of Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem, and that trailer basically only stated that it was being worked on, leaving fans with no idea on how it would turn out. Well, the wait for more information has finally come to an end, and what we got is something that's distinctly inspired by the Shin Megami Tensei series. But what about Fire Emblem? The trailer didn't show much that was inspired by Nintendo's Fantasy series. Or did it? That's where the old analysis machine comes in. Just what secrets and hidden details is Atlus hiding? Well, let's find out. Right from the outset, the game sets the tone of a fantasy in the modern day, as the foreground is some kind of ancient garden, while the background is of modern Tokyo, specifically Shibuya. We also see 4 different characters that would seem to be our protagonists, but only one of them is dressed in traditional Fire Emblem gear. The rest just look like typical teenagers that could be found in the Persona games. As we'll see though, that won't stay the case. What's intriguing is that there seems to be a major theme of music, or at least entertainment, in the game. In the background we can see the building for Shibuya 106, an obvious play on the famous Shibuya 109 department store at the crossing. We're more interested in the advertisement covering the store though. It features a young man named Yoshiro Tsurugi and a girl simply referred to as Curia. Unfortunately, we can't see the entire ad as it's partially blocked. It does seem that these two are associated with each other in some way based on the X between their names, but we never see Yoshiro in the trailer. Otherwise, the best we can pull from this is that it is indeed taking place in Shibuya and is being presented by Fortuna Entertainment. As for the importance of this, we're not entirely sure, but it's likely that those characters will show up at some point. We next see a young girl riding along on an unarmored Pegasus before leaping off. It dissolves into light before flowing after her. The scene cuts away before we can see more, but the end of the trailer does show what happens next. Before that, we couldn't help but notice the girl's costume design. It has a distinct Pegasus vibe with a tail, feathers draped at her side, and the horse-like ears on top of her head. We are likely looking at what Pegasus Knights look like in the game. And that's pretty much confirmed, as the Pegasus reconstitutes back from light, though as a machine version of itself. Its back legs become boosters and basically allows for it to continue flying. This is the only transformation of the Pegasus we see in the trailer, but it's likely a very common occurrence as we take a closer look at the other characters. The idea seems to be to take the straight fantasy of Fire Emblem and transform it into a more technological version that meshes with the modern setting. It's unique to say the least, but certainly not the craziest thing in this trailer. Moving on, we see another quick look at a different character. It's not exactly clear who this darkly dressed person is. He looks evil with his glowing eyes, but his design is clearly influenced by Fire Emblem. Along with the sword in his hand, there's another strapped to his side. The rest of his look is somewhat similar to Lucina, specifically the boots, but with a much darker edge. However, this character is not an enemy, at least not the entire time. Later on, we see him again with a less antagonistic pose, and then again in a massive attack against a crowd of monsters. So despite his appearance, he's definitely on the player's side. This is also our first look at the battle arena for combat. It seems to be inspired by a concert stage complete with digital screens displaying simple graphics and an audience armed with glow sticks in the stands. It's strange to be sure, but we'll have more ideas on it as we see more of the audience. In the meantime, we finally see the presumed main protagonist in his civilian clothes. By all appearances, he seems to be a standard high school student, perfectly content. So in all likelihood, he'll be pulled into this adventure by some outside force. What that force will be, we'll see later. At the very least, he'll transform into his battle costume at one point, though what he's doing in this sequence isn't entirely clear. It may be all part of his transformation, since it even includes a burst of light at the end. And this really may be a full transformation, as his appearance is incredibly similar to Marth. Even his sword has a slight resemblance to the Falchion, just with golden swirls around it that make it much more ornate. And this Marth transformation doesn't seem to be the only one. We see more of the Pegasus Knight during gameplay, and the way she's facing the camera and twirling around makes it seem like she's also just gone through a transformation. We also see that she'll use a lance as her weapon, though like the sword, it's much more stylized than a typical Fire Emblem weapon. But like the male protagonist, what's interesting is that everything about this Pegasus Knight, from the design to the lance, is extremely similar to Keita from Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. That lance may even be her signature wind spear. But is all of this just a coincidence? Are they really transforming into specific characters from Fire Emblem's past, or simply the available classes from the games? We can't really say for sure. Aiding this idea of transformation, though, is a quick animated cutscene showing the long-haired girl from the beginning of the trailer, this time dressed up more like a pop star. Her hair is different from the Pegasus Knight, but as we'll see evidence of later, transformations can really change the way a character looks. But this isn't the only time we see the girl in her pop star outfit. We also see it from behind in a slightly earlier scene as she looks over the Tokyo cityscape. Could there be significance to this costume despite only appearing twice? The next few scenes focus on the redheaded guy from the beginning. We learn that he's actually part of a live show that entertains kids and seems to enjoy it despite the heat. It gives the sense that he has a pretty easygoing personality, which fits as we can see him riding on a motorcycle during battle. What's a little surprising is that he's not the one in the armor. Instead, he's driving it in his civilian clothes while the armor is completely motionless despite carrying a massive lance. Based on the design, this seems to be the crossover's representation of the Cavalier class. It even has a horse for its hood ornament. We're not sure if it's based on a particular Cavalier, but the transformation certainly stands out. It looks like this entire sequence is just a transformation since the redhead next appears in a completely different outfit, but still holding a lance. The lance has a unique design with the chain running down through the entire length, but we couldn't place it as any in particular. It could be the clue to which character he transforms into. Oddly, at no point do we ever see the fourth character, the short-haired girl, transform. Does she come much later in the game, or is her battle transformation a secret for now? Instead, the trailer goes into an animated cutscene showing the long-haired girl in some unknown place, tapping her foot to the music. Is this some kind of special club? After all, there are a bunch of people around her, but we have no idea where it could be located. The game doesn't offer any clues either, instead switching to some kind of dome or dungeon. There's not too much to say about it except that the Triforce is amusingly plastered all over the wall. But this is likely just a coincidence since the symbol has been used long before Zelda. Maybe the developers just couldn't pass up the reference since they were working with Nintendo. What's really odd though is the next scene. We see a Pegasus Knight burst toward the foreground, but it's not the same one as before. The character has an eye-obscuring helmet and a completely different outfit as well as pink feathers attached on the Pegasus. Is this a different character or is it possible that transformations can be upgraded? It would provide yet another Fire Emblem connection. While we have no idea what the attack is that caused the explosion, we do get a look at the enemies caught in the middle of it. One looks like a giant Lance Knight while the other resembles the Black Knight from Path of Radiance, though this may be a coincidental design. We then get to see one of the game's levels. It appears to be some kind of lit scaffolding, but it's surprisingly bare. Did the developers just not fill them in yet? It's just not clear from the small scene we're provided. We do get a look at one potential enemy though in the next sequence. It shows a red cloaked figure emanating some kind of dark power in front of the Shibuya 106 store. It's been said that the city transforms at night, which is what prompts the protagonist to take action. This may be what they were referencing specifically. What's intriguing though is how Shibuya is somewhat analogous to the fantasy-inspired area. We have another young girl standing in the center, this time before what appears to be an ancient altar in the middle of some ruins. On the other side is a giant tree, which could be the fantasy version of the 106 department store. It's possible that this is another world where an alternate version that's more traditionally fantasy exists. It may explain how the Pegasus starts out in its natural form before becoming more mechanical in nature. Continuing on, the next bit is also quite strange. All four main characters seem to be at the top of a building with the Tokyo skyline in the background. There are also giant photos or screens of a different girl in pinup poses, though they are slightly obscured by paint. We believe that this is the end of a dungeon as you can see enemies in the background. They look like some kind of device with legs, but they aren't the weirdest part. It's actually the long-haired girl who's in yet another outfit. She looks determined before grabbing her clothes, doing a quick spin, and changing into a skimpy bikini which shocks the other three. She's obviously confronting someone, but we have no idea why a bikini is what's needed. It's also worth noting that this is the only time the short-haired girl appears in the trailer unless her transformation massively changes her appearance. We then get another animated cutscene with a young woman with long hair singing on a platform in front of the Shibuya 106. At first it seems to be some kind of concert, but everything quickly begins breaking down into a wave of digitized cubes. Is this a direct effect of her singing? Or is something else going on around her? After all, there does look to be spotlights in the background. What's more interesting though is that this appears to be Curia from the giant billboard on the department store. Her hairstyle and even the fur frill at her neck matches the earlier picture perfectly. So does this make her a villain? Well, we don't quite think so, but we'll get to that later. Until then, the next scene transitions to a view of the Earth from space with a giant light show in the middle. But this isn't actually a view from space. We can see that the view is made up of giant panels with stage lights above. So is this part of Curia's concert, or is it a completely different time frame? Just what is going on? The trailer then takes the time to show two of the characters' school lives. What's interesting is that it doesn't look like the long-haired girl and the main character associate with each other despite being in the same class. It could be that the events of the game bring them together rather than being friends from the start. The game is also going for a distinct style where the non-important characters are just colored outlines. Even during gameplay this applies. Not unexpectedly, it looks like Shibuya will serve as the main hub, or can at least be explored in conjunction with other areas of Tokyo. While there isn't too much to see from this angle, we do get a new billboard advertising Curia that shows off her upper body, confirming that the girl from before was her. It's not exactly important, but it's good to have confirmation. The player can also travel down the street to the right of the billboard as we get a view of what's down there. There doesn't seem to be too much though. Along with some advertisements of Newsplash Soda and Dog's Coffee, there are some restaurants on the right side. In the very back there looks to be a clothes store. It's possible that this street is where you equip your characters with items and equipment for the dungeons. Speaking of dungeons, we get a much better look at one which shows that there will be some definite variety. This one appears to be a Japanese palace, but only on the first floor. Maybe entering the building will lead to higher floors. But there's some kind of barrier in the distance. Obviously it has to be broken, but will it be through a key or fighting some kind of monster? This is also the first time we get to see our party, which is made up of our main character, the long-haired girl, and someone apparently new. It all looks to be set up like a traditional RPG, but strangely the magic meter is denoted with EP rather than MP like in the main Shin Megami Tensei games, or SP like Persona. So what could the E stand for? Energy points? We can also see that all of the characters have class symbols next to their portraits. The guy has what seems to be a lord, which makes sense from what we've seen. The long-haired girl's symbol points to a Pegasus Knight, which confirms that she is the girl riding around on the Pegasus from before. The new girl's symbol seems to classify her as either a mage or a cleric. But who is she? Certainly not the short-haired girl from the beginning of the trailer. It turns out that this is actually Curia, as we'll see later, so it looks like there will definitely be more characters than just those four from the beginning. The next location brings us to some kind of music center. Everything's set up like a queue with different posters lining the wall. The NPCs aren't colored outlines here either, so maybe it's possible to talk to them. The poster on the left shows a woman with her arm pointed in the air with "One of Millennium" written out. It's difficult to make out entirely, but the length of the hair could mean that this is Curia, which would make "One of Millennium" her album. But it's the other poster that's more mysterious. It shows a young, green-haired girl named Tiki. Is it possible that this is the same Tiki that's appeared in multiple Fire Emblem games? Tiki, as a quick refresher, first appeared in the original Fire Emblem on Famicom as the 500-year-old princess of the Divine Dragon tribe. This was retold in the DS remake, Shadow Dragon, and her story continued in Fire Emblem Awakening. The Tiki on the poster isn't an exact match for the one in Fire Emblem, but there's more evidence that leads us to this conclusion. The young green-haired girl standing before the altar in the ruins actually shows her face in a later scene. We can see that her green hair goes down along her face, she's wearing a dragon tiara, and has pointed ears, all signs pointing to her being Tiki. And comparing the looks of this girl to the Tiki on the poster, they look remarkably similar. This could be our first real hint that we're looking at a dual universe where people take on different appearances based on the setting. We've already seen it with the Pegasus, but are these Tikis two different people, or merely what they transform into when crossing between worlds? And could this mean that the dark version of Shibuya from before is the fantasy world trying to cross over? We can't really say for sure, but it does fit into the theme of hidden worlds that the Shin Megami Tensei series likes to use. Moving back to the music center, it looks like a conversation with the long-haired girl takes place. We saw this viewpoint before with Tiki, so is this how certain conversations play out? With the characters talking directly into the camera? Maybe the main boy and this girl just happen to run into each other here and decide to hang out before they're pulled into the main story. We can also see a screen in the background that shows Curia's song, Reincarnation, is number 1 for the weekly music ranking Top 100. Whoever she is, she's a massive celebrity. But we also have to wonder if Reincarnation is the song playing during the trailer, or maybe the title is yet another clue to the game's story. It's just a quick moment, but we do get to see the two male characters hanging out in a convenience store soon after. Perhaps the two already know each other before the events of the game, and you'll have the chance to go about your normal life for a while. This is also a story sequence, but it's showing both of them talking rather than just the redhead speaking toward the camera. Why is it different in certain situations? We get to see another new character as well, a young woman with an eye patch and black feathers lining her clothes. She seems to be standing in front of a warped version of Daiken Rasha in Tokyo, which seems to indicate that the game won't take place solely in the Shibuya district. What's unclear is if this girl is directly responsible for what's happening to the world. It's too ambiguous to say for certain at this point, but we don't think so based on later evidence. At any rate, we do believe her design could be a slight reference to the Raven Lagoos in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. The next scene shows another young woman in a red cloak, but it's not the same one as before. That one had blue hair while this one has a darker shade. She's also summoning some kind of winged monster that we actually saw before facing off against the Pegasus Knight. Could it be that these people in the red cloaks are the main antagonists? We suspect that's the case as another shows up in the next scene, though his face is obscured. What's notable though is that this is taking place in the Triforce Dome we saw before, except this time the triangles are spread farther apart. The man in the red cloak is shielding himself from the light that's coming from within the male protagonist. This light seems to take the form of a soul. Could this be what triggers the transformations? Are the characters actually taking the soul of Fire Emblem characters, or at least the classes inside them in order to battle? It seems to be a decent theory at the least, except he actually uses the light to force it into the Red Cloak's body. So that would discount our original theory, right? We're not so sure. But at the very least, this seems to be the moment the story proper kicks off, perhaps comparable to when the main character first releases their persona in the Persona series. Oh, but we're far from finished with this crossover's mysteries. We get another look at a fighting arena, and this one seems to be in a different location. Gone are the digitized blocks, replaced by something that looks like stained glass. At the very least, the crowd is still here. But then we have the two that are actually fighting, one of which is a boy in black armor wielding a red sword and emanating power. Could this be a new character? We do see some hair peeking out beneath his helmet, which seems to match the main characters, though this is admittedly guesswork. Perhaps this is a sign that a single character can take on multiple classes. The other character is in the same outfit that the red-headed boy was in before, even using the same chained lance. The difference is that the helmet covers the entire face. Could it be that different classes have to be defeated in order to use them? Or is it that the redhead was overwhelmed by the transformation and needs to be calmed down? Or could it be like in Fire Emblem where you can face enemies with the same classes available to you? There are just too many possibilities, especially since we see this same red armor in the trailer blasting through enemies with a fiery bird at his back. So he definitely becomes an ally somehow. Could it be that different characters can use the same class but have completely different designs? Or does the character become a kind of summon to help deal with enemies? We then get a look at a few more monsters. First up is a huge piece of armor with a possible zombie head sticking out of the helmet. Could this be the crossover's version of an armor knight? It's more likely than you'd think since there's a tattered red cloth around its neck along with a series of triangles. This same design appeared on the man in the red cloak that was attacked by the protagonist's light. So it could be possible that the red cloaks can transform as well, maybe even into well-known villains from the Fire Emblem series. The next monster is absolutely huge, potentially even a boss. It's difficult to get a completely clear look at it, but the two axes it has for hands could indicate an axe armor knight. We do get a good look at this arena though, which is completely new. It has a traditional Japanese vibe to it and screens showing sakura blossoms. This could be the fighting arena of the dungeon we saw earlier in the trailer. We can also see the full party with the red-headed boy on the right and the Pegasus Knight on the left. But the most amusing thing is that Fire Emblem's critical hits are indeed here. The main character launches himself through the enemy and its life bar drains just like in Fire Emblem. It's a nice little callback. Moving on to the next combat scene, we see the confirmation that Curia will indeed be a member of the party. Her weapon seems to be some kind of weaponized mic stand. The girl seems to be a complete mystery, but along with her is another arena. This one has the crowd in a much higher position with banners streaming down the side. It's difficult to make out all of them, but one reads O3, which could stand for some kind of organization. There's also a screen in the back panning Shibuya 106. So is it possible that one of the dungeons will be in the department store? What's stranger is that there's a hexagon screen behind Curia that shows the girl with the eye patch. Why is she there? Is there a connection between the two? As we find out soon, there is. But in the next scene, we finally get a good look at the combat layout. It's the same party that we saw before with the same classes as well, just at a higher level. But it's the top of the screen that's interesting. Here we see a combat bar that marks when each fighter can move. Actions seem to be divided into rounds, with the first move from a player character denoting the start of the next round. Reaching the left side of the bar means that character can perform an action. It's extremely similar to the battle system in the Grandia series, making us wonder if the tactics available there will show up here as well. The monster in the scene is also quite different as the head leaves the body in order to attack with spinning blades. As long as he doesn't lose it, I guess. The next fight scene shows the summoned wing monster from before. It looks like it's time for the boss battle. The meter shows that we'll have 2 allies as well, even though they can't be seen. But the major revelation is that we finally can confirm with no doubt that Curia is the 3rd member of the party. We can see her with her mic stand on the left, meaning that this is what her mage or cleric class looks like. We also see the girl with the eye patch in the hexagon again, except this time we can see that she's also holding a weaponized mic stand. The setting has also changed for this scene to show some kind of triangle-lined dome. It's then that we meet a completely new character that literally jumps into battle in order to set up her bow shot. So we can confirm that the archer class will be represented as well. At first this seems to be part of a cutscene, but what if you can switch out your party of 3 at any time, and when the new fighter enters, they get a specialized attack? It would be useful for dealing with the variety of enemy types. But this girl doesn't typically have light blue hair. In another fight scene, a blonde girl is part of the party. We can even see her class symbol, which seems to resemble a bow and arrow. This would make them one and the same. Are transformations really that drastic though to actually change hair color as well? We believe they are, as a future scene from this fight shows the party, specifically the blue-haired archer. And since we've already seen the other 2 characters in the party attack at this point, that has to be the blonde girl. There's even a hexagonal screen behind her showing off more of her profile. But a unique ability that this girl has is one of her attacks. It's her turn for action, yet it's the main character as a lord attacking. Somehow this girl is able to chain the party's attacks together, even the ones not taking part in the fight. As we said, it's the main boy that attacks first, except he does it with thunder magic, which is very effective against the fire minotaur. This is potentially key, as the anima triangle from Fire Emblem could be in place. In that triangle, thunder is effective against fire, fire is effective against wind, and wind is effective against thunder. Going back to the previous battle scenes, we saw similar symbols during enemy attacks. One showed a sword while another had a targeting reticle, which could mean a ranged attack. And it definitely seems like the weapons triangle could be in place as well. One of the other attacks in this chain shows a lance symbol, so it looks like that strategy from Fire Emblem is definitely in this game as well. However, we also have a Shin Megami Tensei vibe when it shows that the monster is weak to thunder and loses HP. It's the same kind of font that appears in other games. This also helps confirm that the life bar drain from the critical attack earlier is reserved for criticals. But the next to attack in this combo is the girl with the long hair. Typically, she's dressed in her Pegasus Knight gear, but this time she's wearing her civilian clothes, yet she still has the lance. So it looks like transformations are something that have to be chosen, rather than something that automatically happens at the beginning of fights. She uses a wind attack, but the text from the attack is blocked by the combo meter, so we can't confirm if it was less effective against the fire monster. The attack also gives us a better look at the arena, which also has the board reading Shibuya 106. You would think that this is the same arena from before, but the crowd is pretty much even with the central stage, so either the arena shifts as the fight goes on, or there are a ton of variations to the battle arena. While it's possible that there are a lot of arenas in the game, we can actually see the banners from before, so this lends credence to the idea of a shifting arena. To what end though? Well, we'll return to that very soon, but let's finish looking over this fight first. The next fighter in the chain is Curia. All we see her do is wave her hands about, but it may have skipped past her actual ice attack. At first it seems that ice magic would disrupt the anima triangle, but upon further research it looks like certain Fire Emblem games did include it. It mainly takes the place of wind magic, so it's effective against thunder, but weak to fire. The final attack is the red-headed boy with his lance. There's not much to mention about him specifically since we already went over the weapon triangle, but this scene does provide a definitive clue to who the woman with the eye patch is. In the background we can see the long-haired girl still in her civilian clothes, yet the hexagon portrait shows what she'd look like as a Pegasus Knight, so this could mean that the eye patch woman is actually Curia transformed. This idea is pretty much confirmed with the victory animation as all of the characters are celebrating, including the girl with the eye patch, but there's no sign of Curia. There's even an extra detail as we see that the costume includes a devil tail. During the celebration though, we do get a quick look at another arena, this one taking the appearance of a television studio with monitors everywhere. The final arena we see mostly looks like the others, except that the crowd is not filling the stands and do not have their glow sticks. This could be further evidence that a better performance in battle draws a bigger crowd and could even transform the arena itself into something grander. In fact, we see that the stands are empty in this scene as well, where the Pegasus Knight cheers. Is it possible that players can work the crowd during fights as if they were putting on a show? It would make the arenas and the audiences make more sense and explain why they would expand and change appearance. The audience may even interact with players in the same way as Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. One of the final scenes shows the main protagonist looking over a ruined city that's both flooded and has structures floating in the air. Is this a part of the fantasy world, a vision, or did something really happen to Tokyo? We just don't know for sure, but the last scene we do see of the long-haired girl shows her landing on her Pegasus. She seems to be coming from one of the many dark portals surrounding the Shibuya 106. Could she be returning from a trip to the fantasy world, or is it directly related to her transformation? In any case, there's a reason the trailer ends with this scene. During a past interview, Hitoshi Yamagami, a longtime producer of the Fire Emblem series, is quoted as saying, "For a long time, I've wanted to create a Fire Emblem in our times, in the real world. Imagine a Pegasus that comes from the sky and lands on Building 109 of Shibuya, Tokyo. I always thought that would be incredible." It looks like with Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem, Yamagami is seeing his wish come true, and the rest of the game looks to be just as unique. No one imagined that this is the form the crossover would take, but it certainly is a crossover in the way that it's apparently using elements from across both series. And there's a strong musical theme throughout this trailer, from the style, to the weapons, to the battle arenas themselves. Even the Japanese title has a musical reference, Illusory Revelations Sharp FE, something you guys corrected us on in the analysis preview. While it's something different from what most expected, it does have a ton of potential, and I cannot wait until we get a clearer picture on just how this game will play. Of course, let us know if we missed anything in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at GameXplain to keep up with everything we do. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain for more on Shin Megami Tensei, Fire Emblem, and other things gaming.